Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today we are excited to have back on the show Lama Kathy Wesley. And she's going to be talking about the concept of heaven and hell in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, or I don't know, maybe all of Buddhist tradition. I'm not quite sure about that. But before we get started, I also wanted to mention for you folks that don't know about Lama Kathy, she has been a student of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche since 1977, and she participated in the first 3-year retreat led by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche at Karma Ling Retreat Center in upstate New York, and thus earned the title of Retreat Lama. And she now serves as a resident teacher at the Columbus KTC. So we're thrilled to have her back. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our broadcast, our second to last show. Next week is the last one for the year, and then we take a break in December, and we'll be back in January with a new start time. We'll be at 2 p.m. in the Tuesday afternoons, and going to push it a little bit later to give us more time to troubleshoot if we have some problems. Anyway, get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. And next week, our guest will be Master Chaos, who we're going to talk about some paranormal stuff in cinema and so forth. He's a big cinemaphile as well as paranormal guy, and really very entertaining. It should be a lot of fun and a nice light show to end our year on. So thank to all of you guys who have supported us. If you're on our website and you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. But the main thing, click like and subscribe, and that really helps a great deal, gets YouTube to pay attention to us. So do us a favor and do that for sure. So I'm not going to take up too much time because it's a great topic, and I always love having Lama Kathy. So without further ado, take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And welcome, Lama Kathy.
Hi, it's wonderful to be with you this afternoon. I see I have a sunbeam. Look, I have a sunbeam that's chasing me around the room.
That's a good omen.
This particular broadcast, I'm coming to you from the Columbus Karma Take-Some Choling Tibetan Buddhist Meditation Center in downtown Columbus, Ohio. So downtown Columbus to downtown Venice. Happy to be here.
Thank you. It looks beautiful. Yes, and I know the monastery was finished. How long ago was it finished now?
Yeah, we finished our Dharma Center in March of this year, and we've been meeting here weekly ever since. And it's been fun to come back to our neighborhood because we missed it for the 6 years that we were gone. But it's lovely to be here. It just is.
That's so great. I'm so happy for you.
It's lovely to be anywhere, you know.
It's wonderful. And the shrine looks beautiful behind you.
This is our temporary shrine, and it looks like the sunbeam is just going to keep chasing me around the room. So I'm going to have to just accept the sunbeam. But it really is just our temporary shrine. We're going to some of these statues were with us during our fire, and then after the fire, they were rescued from the building. And so they're going to become part of our new shrine, which is going to fill this whole wall with cabinetry. And we're going to have some beautiful statuary that will be really inspiring for the people who are sitting here and meditating every week with us.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. And yeah, I do love all the basically Buddhist artwork. It's amazing how much love and also craftsmanship go into a lot of it. So it is inspiring, I think. So let's get started on the topic. So heaven, and now I had suggested the hell realm, and then you came back with heaven and hell. So I really like that version better, actually. So what would you like to start with?
Well, I think that every single faith tradition in humanity has some idea of suffering and understanding of suffering. and that suffering is of many, many kinds, and many of the sufferings we experience are sadly of our own making. And so the Buddhist teaching on what are called the 6 realms of existence that all beings can be categorized in, all of these 6 realms can exist in one human life, or among humanity, or cosmologically, from the what they call the 3 worlds in Buddhism: the world below the earth, the world on the earth, and the world above the earth. They call it the 3 worlds, which basically means all of the universe. And so all of these beings are of 6 different types. And they actually correspond to what are called realms or universes. But what's really interesting about it is that these are actually both states of mind and physical locations. And so every single religion has some concept of a world of happiness that they call heaven. And then every religion has a world of suffering that they call hell. But what's interesting about the Buddhist teaching on heaven and hell is that it depends on the individual, whether you're in heaven or whether you're in hell. So in some ways, heaven is right here in this life. And in some ways, hell is right here in this life. And so we can actually choose from moment to moment which of the 6 realms we're inhabiting. So when we talked about the hungry ghost realm the last time, we talked about the karmic experience of a person who's a hungry ghost, that they are never satisfied, that they always want more and more and more, and that we can see this reflected in Buddhist cosmology, Buddhist mythology, and that the hungry ghost is depicted as having a very big stomach and a very tiny mouth, and and in this sort of iconography of suffering, it's very obvious why they are suffering hunger and thirst, because they have tiny little mouths and big stomachs. So the idea is that when we starve ourselves in some ways, then we're also leading to a situation where we're always in a position of poverty and need. Now, heaven and hell are actually, they come about from 2 different states of mind. Just as the hungry ghost realm comes about because of miserliness and stinginess, that develops us into the hungry ghost kind of person. There's also the heaven and the hell kind of person. The heaven kind of person thinks that they're better than everyone else. They're sort of arrogant and they're very prideful, and they think that they have somehow made it in this life and that they're in this amazing place. And that it is the result of a lot of goodness that they have done in the past, that they are in this experience of happiness and pleasure and like, what do they call it? A friction-free life, where there's no trouble. But the problem with that is that all of the good karma that they have accumulated that gives rise to this experience makes them very arrogant. And that when those days are gone, when the money's gone, so to speak, the good karma has been spent, and they begin to have a lot of suffering because they see that they are actually still in the cosmos of suffering, thought that they were like above all of that in heaven, and they were like out of all of the suffering. But then at the end of their lives, they look down and say, I've spent all my karma. It's all gone now. There's only one way for me, and that is down. They have this intense suffering in the last days of their life, that even though they think they're gods, they're like gods, they think, wow, I'm beyond all this. When their vision changes and they see that they have spent all of their good karma on pleasure, then they see where they're going, and it's very terrifying.
It's interesting because in Christianity, a little bit I understand is heaven seems to be a place you want to go to. And So, but I don't really know more than that. I mean, because I wasn't a practicing Christian. And here in the six realms, the heavenly realm is not necessarily the best realm for enlightenment.
It isn't, because if we talk about the six realms in general, hell is unremitting suffering. And you know what brings hell about? Anger and hatred. So when the person is spending their life just working on their anger, working on their hatred, and acting out their anger and hatred, it's like they're burning all the time. It's like they're on fire all the time. And so hell is that experience that is born from hatred and anger. And so we can see that that's a very difficult situation. And then the hungry ghost is the next realm up. They're actually better off than the hell beings, because they have a couple of moments where they don't have torment. Then the animal realm is also, it all has its own suffering of being a predator or prey. Instinct. And people are guided, or beings are guided by their instincts, and it comes from chosen ignorance. They choose ignorance, and that's how they end up in the animal realm. And the human realm, that's us, and we're the ones who suffer from poverty and constant toil to just get nowhere, right? And so it's born from attachment and wanting. Then the jealous gods, they think that they deserve all the things that the gods have, and so they're always fighting. And so that's their experience, is always fighting and scrapping. And then the gods, they think they have it made, but they're all suffering. The gods think they're above all that, and that they're finished with all that, but they're actually all just stuck in samsara. And so the Buddha's advice was, if you want to get off the wheel of suffering, then you need to look within at what is projecting this experience. You see what I'm saying? It's like you look at the mind that is experiencing hell. You look at the mind that's experiencing the ghost realm, the animal realm, the human realm. You look at that mind that's having that experience. And then you begin to understand and we understand and then free ourselves from the negative actions that lead to this suffering over and over again. So hell doesn't last forever in Buddhism, and heaven doesn't last forever in Buddhism. And they're really, neither one of them are places you want to go. It's said in Buddhism that the very best realm is the human realm, where, interestingly enough, we can visit the suffering of hell, living right here as a human being. We can visit it. We've been that angry sometimes, where we're like on fire.
Absolutely. You know what? And I read Trungpa Rinpoche's quick view about hell and transcending madness, and I hadn't read it for years. And one of the things that I found really striking, that I think many people can relate to, is he talks about this one-upmanship being a form of aggression, and how you can have this aggression with your friend, and you can say, well, I'm better than this person because I'm smarter, I'm more intelligent. And I thought, well, who hasn't thought that? Who hasn't experienced it, especially in the day and age where you're supposed to market yourself and become a brand, which I hate that word. I will not become a brand. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. A brand to me is like some kind of cereal, And so I read it, and it was that what you were saying, that experience and of how that builds up this aggression, and how he talks about how it's suffocating and there's no spaciousness. And it really makes you realize, that we all have some moments of hell and many moments of hell, and also how to get out of hell. And which is, I would think, be very important as well. Okay, I'm here. How can I get out of it?
I get that. I hear that. And see, and I think that for those of us who are become self-aware, we see what we do. We see the things that we do habitually. At first, we're sort of swimming in the story of our everyday life. We're just swimming in this story of, I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy. I have to overpower the bad guys in my life to get what I want. And that's where Trungpa talks about the lack of spaciousness, because if we go to the core teachings of Buddhism, what the core teachings of Buddhism say about an individual is that we are a body and a mind. We're a body and a mind. And the body is called the fully ripened result of our mind, which has never been created by anyone and will never go out of existence. And so in a way, our mind is a continuity that goes through many, many different experiences, even in this lifetime. So, okay, even in this lifetime, we go through many experiences, and that's why we can visit hell, we can visit heaven, and it all depends on what is happening inside our minds and what we choose, the thoughts, the feelings and emotions that we choose to cultivate within ourselves. There's a famous Zen story that's told about heaven and hell. And Pema Chodron tells this story in one of her books, the Buddhist author Pema Chodron. She wrote Start Where You Are, one of the great books about training the mind in love and compassion. And she said there's a samurai story in which a Buddhist monk is sitting in silent meditation, and a samurai warrior comes up to him and says, "Monk," he's got his hand on, the samurai has his hand on the hilt of his sword and says, "Monk, tell me about heaven and hell." And the monk looks up and says, "Why would I tell an ugly slob like you about heaven and hell?" And the samurai, of course, now being disrespected, not only has his hand on the hilt of his sword, he draws his sword and he raises it, and he's going to strike the monk dead. That's what he wants to do. He's like there. And then the monk looks up at him and says, "That's hell." And okay, then the samurai realizes that he's almost killed a man of the cloth, right? He's almost killed a holy being who was just testing him. He almost struck him dead. And he realizes what happens, and the samurai falls to his knees. He drops his sword, he falls to his knees, and he begins to weep. Like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And the monk looks down at him and said, "That's heaven." So, to me, this story is illustrative of heaven is right here and hell is right here. That moment of utter blind rage, that's hell. And the sublimeness of surrender, the sublimeness of realizing who we have been and what we have done, and feeling the intensity of grief and love and loss. The idea is that we touch our heart in these moments, and that is what gives rise to the feeling of heaven, this softness, this spaciousness, this openness. And I think Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche talks about it in his books. Pema Chodron talks about it in her books. And that this is available to us when we can drop the story. And this is where meditation comes in, and why meditation is so important in Buddhism. Because if we're not self-aware, we dive into the story of what we think is happening. The monk feeling the samurai feeling disrespected by the monk, and the blind rage. He believed in the story that he did not want to be called that name. He did not want to see himself in that way. And he thought that by striking down the monk, he would strike down that which was the ugly individual inside him.
Right.
So the threat he saw as being external was really internal.
What's sad is Michael and I, we watch a lot of homicide shows, and it's crazy what people murder over. And it'll even be things like disrespect. And it's really eye-opening and totally tragic. I don't know what I thought. I thought there would be more murders based on passion of something logical, but sometimes it's something completely trivial like that. And I mean, obviously there's a background of a cycle in that person's mind who would murder someone over something so small. But it really can. You can see that illustration of the samurai in the world. I mean, it's not that part isn't that hard to see, actually.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I think is very concerning when we look at society as a whole, in that somebody was talking about the level of modern discourse online and on television and so forth, that it's like they actually called it the angertainment industry.
Ooh, that's accurate.
The angertainment industry. The idea that by making people angry, you get attention. By saying something outrageous and being cruel, with the maximum, dialing up the maximum cruelty being what gets you the most attention. And so I think that if we realize where this is taking us, then we really do. I mean, if we realize where this sort of angertainment industry, where people make money off outrage and anger, it's like a drug. And I think that this is what produces so much hell in this world now, and it always has, is that some people find it useful to make other people angry so that they can control those other people.
Right.
They could just be like the head demon in one neighborhood of hell. But okay, I mean, they're basically right. They're just like, I'm going I am going to be the head demon in this little neighborhood of hell, and I'm going to have power over all these people. And when I push the button, they will jump, and that is so cool. And that's kind of, I think, where the sort of addictive quality of anger comes from.
Yeah, and you know what Trungpa Rinpoche says about that? That's interesting too. He talks about, there are two things he said in Transcending Madness. One, he says it's like eating yourself inwardly, and initially you sort of get some energy from that. And the other thing that struck me, what he said was, you end up in the hell realm. You have to have relationships in order to end up there. So like what you're saying is you can't, it doesn't just come from your own neurosis, which I guess some other states do. It has to do with relationship. And I thought that was a really key and obvious thing that I hadn't thought about, that aggression is built on successfully relationship. Just as you're saying, like, I'm going to get all these people riled up and they're going to feed me this energy that's false, but at the time it makes me feel bigger.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I think that as human beings, we are social beings. We are social beings. It's just the way it is. We're and that what happens is we enter into a relationship, and what we end up seeing in other people is the things we see in ourselves. When we see something bad in another person, and we become judgmental to that other person, that actually, if we pay attention to what we are judging in the other person, we can actually see it as being our own flaw or failing. I have a lot of friends, as I've mentioned on previous broadcasts, I have a lot of friends in the 12-step recovery tradition, and they have a saying, and the saying is, if you can spot it, you got it. If you spot it, you got it. So if you're judging that other person, saying, well, that other person needs to be more patient, or that other person needs to do this or needs to do that, the relationship actually can give us good information about ourselves if we allow the relationship to give us that information. When we judge others, we're actually also judging ourselves. There's parts of us that
I'm mixed about that. I think there is some truth in that, and there's some not truth, because, for instance, I'll watch these homicide shows, and I really don't have a lot of judgment about them. I'm just kind of like amazed. And I also know in the right circumstance, I probably could murder someone. I am not fooled to think that I could never do that. But there is that kind of judgment that has, I think, kind of, I don't know, vibration to it, a resonance where you're always picking on that issue. That, I think, is a reflection of something I have not accepted in myself, or I've overly repressed. For me, it has to do with narcissism. So I'm really kind of triggered by narcissists, but there might be a part of me that needs a little narcissism, like needs a little bit of ego. And I'm too out of balance. Like I'm not being human about it. Like, okay, now and then I like a little attention. That's okay. So I think it's more like that for me, from my own observation, that there are some things that I feel capable of, but I don't judge the other person. I'm sort of like, wow, I hope I don't ever get in that situation.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
That's right. Well, see, and this is the difference between an unexamined life and an examined life. You know, when we can examine our own motivations and we can examine our own behavior and actually have a self-awareness of our own place in this world. If we have an examined mind and an examined life, we can see things in a more balanced way. Like it's not that we have those bad qualities within us, but the idea is that we need to pay attention. We need to pay attention to this. And as you say, you saw that particular trait in someone and said, well, I hope I never get to that spot. But yes, we all need balance. We need to have a little bit of self-care. We need to have confidence. We need to have all of these things. But do we need to try to overpower other people?
No.
Emotionally, right? And try to overpower and control people. And this is, I think, where the trouble starts for us, because it becomes a little bit of a slippery slope. Well, I need to teach that person a lesson,
Oh yeah, and no, and it always comes back on you too. That's what's amazing about that. And there are also nuances and subtleties around these concepts too that are a little harder to identify initially. Sometimes you'll see that, even like I'll see that with, maybe two friends kind of like talking. You kind of see the one person is trying to share something and the other one has, a better story that they want to share. And it's not a huge thing, but it is, you can kind of notice it. You're like, that person wants to kind of top that story in the moment. And so I think, like you said, the examined life is really the key. And that seems to be true of many, many spiritual paths that really emphasize the examined life, and also being okay when we're not there yet. Like one of the things that made it easier for me is I'd say, you know what, I'm just not quite there yet. I'm okay with that. Like I'm doing the best I can in this one particular problem I have, and I've improved this much, but I know I have more to go, but I'm okay with that, because that seems to also help, as if you sort of say it's okay to be where I'm at with that particular imperfection.
And I think that this is really valuable. I'm really glad you shared that idea, because I remember one of my teachers, His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche. He said, I really need for all of you to think about this. He said, realize that you are always doing your best, and actually everybody else is always doing their best. And he said the reason for this is that any moment in time, we are the summary of everything that came before. And that's we cannot be anywhere else than where we are right now. And that there will be days when that's great, but there will be days when it's really in the pits and we're not at our best. but we are doing our best. See, and that's the thing. If we can have a sense of humor about ourselves and kind of chuckle a bit, like, oh, there I go trying to run the world. I've talked about this before, that my husband and I have agreed that whenever we have a disagreement, that we would kind of look at each other and say, but you could be more like me if you just try. I told that story, I think a couple of episodes ago, because it was basically a story about one of my husband's coworkers who had an extremely high opinion of himself, and he was really not a nice guy, and he would say, well, everybody, what's wrong with the people in this world? They could be more like me if they just try, which of course is comical because he didn't have that kind of personality you'd want to emulate. but making that agreement that we will accept the fact that, here I am trying to change you. It isn't that funny. And here I go trying to run the world. Isn't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of examining and being willing to look and to actually take one step back from our story, the story, like, I'm a good person, that person's obviously in the wrong. And just because that's what leads to that disrespect that leads to harm, is where we can't disengage. We can't step back from the story, cannot disengage. And this is why all of the disciplines of meditation and prayer and this kind of, all of these spiritual practices can help us to take that step back. And when we take the step back, the story begins to fall apart, and we begin to see things as they really are, as opposed to how we think they might be. And that leads us into more empathetic behavior, and less judgment. And I think that's why C. Rinpoche told us, recognize that you are always doing your best, and recognize that everybody else is always doing their best. On any given day, that best could or should be somewhere else, but here we are.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I also find that the more I've accepted my shortcomings, if I see it in someone else, I have to admit, I'll go, oh yeah, I can relate to that. I said, I've been there. So, it's a long process. I mean, I think that, again, I think I mentioned this a long time ago. I'm really glad that when I was a young woman, I met a system that allows you to take your time, that in Buddhism, it does take time, that's okay, that it takes time, instead of this instantaneous culture we're in, where you're a master Reiki now in 3 weekends, and it's ridiculous, and it takes away even from what is the concept of a master if it takes only 3 weekends to become a master Reiki teacher. It's like, so I think that for me, that was one of the really beneficial teachings I got when I was really young, that it made me relax a little bit on my progress.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think we need that, because see, and this brings us back to heaven and hell, doesn't it? Because in some faith traditions, the idea is that there is a great separation, of beings in the after death state, and that some of them are going into a pit of suffering forever, and some of them are going to a reward forever. Whereas Buddhism sees us more as being on a continuum, and moving along that continuum, so that we actually do have the chance to improve every moment of every day, which is why the examination of our moment-to-moment thoughts, feelings, and emotions is so important, and that self-awareness is so important, and that's why meditation becomes so important, because that allows us to build that spaciousness that Trungpa talks about. Because when you're sitting in meditation and you're just doing one thing, watching the breath come in, watching the breath go out, and just being with that technique and process, then the thoughts rise and fall, and you can see the thoughts rise and fall and see they're really nothing inside, because you get like a big ugly thought while you're meditating, and then it just disappears in a moment.
Yeah.
And that was heaven, or that was hell. and it's just disappeared out of view suddenly. And so that begins to allow us to see the possibility that we could actually change where we are in a moment. We can change where we are instantaneously, and it's not going to be forever. The only thing that's kind of forever is spiritual awakening. And that is, and then once you're spiritually awakened, you can visit people in hell. You can visit people in heaven and try to help them understand that they're still in a cycle, that they're, that they can be free.
Well, I have a question about the visitation of the hell realms. Isn't it true that Chenrezig emptied the hell realms more than one time? And then, if so, is that really possible for someone else to help at least temporarily remove people from the hell realms? Or is that more of just a story to meditate on?
I actually, if we look at this life, let's look at this life, and because I think this life offers us some ideas about this, because this life that we are living right now is like the big cosmological story in a small space. So if you look at your own life, there may have been a time in your life where you were feeling deep despair or deep sadness or deep pain. And someone maybe reached out to you and said, here, let me help you. And in that moment that person helped you, you feel relieved. Was that relief permanent? No, it was not permanent, because we're still in samsara. So because we're still in samsara, our pain may have been relieved for a little while, but we still have to keep moving along the continuum of spiritual development, hoping to continue moving in an upward direction so that we can use the skills we have learned to help other people. And so, yes, I do believe that it's possible for beings who are awakened to help and to reach out to people in lower states of existence and help them at least for a little while to relieve their suffering. And this is actually depicted in verse. If this is kind of an interesting story. I often compare it to a story in the Bible. But anyway, there's a chapter in the guide. There's a book called The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva, who he lived in the 8th century. He was a Buddhist scholar and monastic. And he was asked to give a talk, and he gave this masterful 10-chapter talk that lasted and lasted and lasted. And in the final chapter, he has like a vision, not like Revelation's Bible vision, of like the horsemen of the apocalypse and all that stuff. It's not quite like that kind of vision. I'll call it a Buddhist kind of vision. And in his work, he is trying to talk about the logical conclusion of a life that is spent in service to others, working on our own negativity, purifying our own negative mental afflictions, working on virtuous mind, and then what that person becomes capable of doing after they reach Buddhahood or awakening. So he has this vision of hell, and in all these beings are in hell, and they're talking to each other, and they say, friends, gather quickly here, because look in the sky. And so all these beings in hell are looking up, and Chenrezig appears to them, the Bodhisattva of compassion that you're talking about, appears to them. And they go running to him. And then, and they say, they also talk about Vajrapani, another one of the bodhisattvas appearing in hell, and Manjushri, another one of the bodhisattvas appearing in hell. So this triumvirate of bodhisattvas, who symbolize the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, but that's a whole nother topic. But these three bodhisattvas appearing in hell and relieving the suffering of beings in hell. So the idea, to me, that's just, I cry when I read this, because this is, we start our path of awakening with just the wish to benefit others. Maybe a little, may I benefit sentient beings who I see and interact with, and so this little tiny wish to be a better person, this little tiny wish to have goodness in our life, that we then nurture and grow and develop, and nurture and grow and develop, then it can flower as awakening, Buddhahood, and liberation from this wheel of suffering, so that we can actually go and touch those beings in hell and lift them up, even if it's just for a little while. I think it's totally worth doing. Totally worth doing.
It's a challenge in the real sense. I think we talked about this on one of the shows. We talked about violence in society, and anger is an interesting one for me, because I had repressed it when I was young a lot. I didn't even think I felt anger until I finally got in touch with it. And then it was sort of like I would have these moments where it was like inappropriate, like how I would express it. So I've worked with anger, and I certainly have not perfected it, but I have come to some points where I can handle other people's anger without reacting, because of my own dealing with it. And it's always interesting to me what happens if you don't react back to people. And I mean, even inwardly. And I don't always do that, but there are times I've been able to say, oh, let me just see what's going on here. And it's only because I've been studying it. And I even had boyfriends, we try different things in arguments, like try different techniques, and does this work or not? It's like an experiment, So I don't know what my whole point is, but I know that anger, when people are like let's take a look at like Trump. He's always in anger. And, it's hard to have any feelings at all of wanting to help him, even in meditation, because he comes across so rude and so cruel. And it's totally understandable that maybe it's easier to work with people that are initially just suffering the consequences of poverty, and not the angry people, because there's not as much, of that fieriness that anger has, which is frightening, understandably, because it can sometimes lead to terrible things, but not always. Sometimes it's just, a bluff. So I think the teachings on anger and wanting to feel compassionate towards some of these people, I can see where it can be challenging to even want to pray for them, let alone help them.
Oh, yes. I've encountered many times in my life as a teacher of Buddhism, I've encountered people at public talks who say to me, I will pray for anyone, but I won't pray for fill in the blank. Whoever is their least favorite person, I will never pray for that person. I will never, do this. And I think that it's because part of us feels that part of us feels that there is an injustice being perpetrated by some people, that some people are perpetrating injustice, and because they're perpetrating injustice, they themselves are not deserving of goodness. And I think that this happens. And again, I think that when we allow ourselves to nurse angry feelings toward any person, wishing them ill and so on, that it's like we're drinking poison but expecting them to die. And that's another phrase that was borrowed, or another slogan borrowed from the 12-step tradition, is that holding a grudge against someone is like drinking poison yourself and then expecting them to die.
Right.
Because that your anger doesn't change them.
No.
Okay, but your anger does change you. And this is where, and a lot of scientific studies has been done on the effect of cortisol, the anger hormone, that it gets released in the body when we are nurturing feelings of anger. And that's what's so damaging. This injection, if you will, of cortisol, it brings on diabetes. It brings on all kinds of terrible diseases and problems, and yet we hold on to the idea that if we show even an ounce of compassion toward a person who is perpetrating injustice, that is somehow allowing them to have a free pass. And I think that that's where the mistake is being made. We have to see the person who is doing wrong as already being in hell. They're actually already there. They're actually already there. They're already in hell. So the idea is that maybe we can't feel compassion for them, but we can ask for whatever being we believe in to have compassion for them and to bless them. Because if we do that, then we're not actively hating them. For every moment that we're asking for some great being to bless that person and to help change their mind and make them a better person, it may or may not work, but at least we're working on who that person is to us. Because when we're holding that grudge against the person, saying, I will never pray for that person, never, never, there's like something that's happening within us, some lack of acceptance, some anger almost toward ourselves. And I think that leads us into some really dark spaces inside of ourselves. And I think that we need to pay attention to what we're doing, at what we consciously think about, the stories we consciously tell ourselves. And of course, there are always going to be these beings who make us angry and make us upset. But something you just said that was very important was you can now sit with certain styles of angry expression and not react. And that means that you've come to an accommodation and understanding that it's not you.
Yeah, that is important. That is true. When you can really not experience that anger because it isn't you, it's their pain or that, and it does give you a different response, and that you, and certainly it doesn't mean that you'll never be angry again. Good luck with that one. Though what I also like this, and this is what I remember in the 5 Buddha families, that there is with anger, the positive side of it is this clarity, this moment of clarity. And if you've ever been angry enough that you have this realization and that you're trying to get to that realization part. And I don't know if that's a certain kind of anger, but I've had moments like where something has been revealed of truth. And then that was helpful to think, okay, anger has something for me, that I need to recognize and acknowledge, and then I'll release it. So anyway, that was always helpful for me too, even though it didn't always work all the time.
Well, and that idea that all of the mental afflictions, the five mental afflictions like ignorance, attachment, aversion, pride, and jealousy, those 5 basic emotions that have, that when they are fully relinquished, and seen through, become the 5 wisdoms. And that's what you're talking about. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche talks about this in his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And Trungpa Rinpoche talks about this in his book of the 8 consciousnesses and 5 Buddha families and the 8 consciousnesses. He talks about this, but the transformational aspect of it is not accomplished by giving into the anger and letting it take us over. It's by seeing that the mind beneath that anger, is not a material thing. And that that is what can help us to relinquish the stories that are being told to us by our mental afflictions and allow us to be present with our minds in all of its aspects. And so we have to basically see what mind is, which is why, again, meditation is so important, because at first meditation is just a technique to be able to pay attention
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, when we get, that's called shamatha meditation or tranquility meditation, but it's when we get to vipassana or the insight meditation, and where we meditate on the mind itself and we see what is this mind itself, that it's not, has no color, it has no shape, it has no beginning, it has no ending. In that open spaciousness, we see that we don't need to react to anything. Everything is actually okay at that level. And we may, well, we're not living there right now, so we go into the idea for brief moments, and then we fall out of it again and back into the story of our lives and all of this sort of thing. But these moments of clarity do allow us to see that other people are locked in their worlds and they can't get out. Sometimes that really, it makes me incredibly sad, because the people, and this, I know you're talking about true crime and homicide stories and things like this. When I think about the people who commit mass violence, it's like they have been taken over by some type of evil thought that has possessed them into thinking that this is what they must do, and hurting others is what they must do. But when we look at it, all I see is the pain of a person who had so much potential in life, and they just basically are drowning in this sea of anger and hatred. And I think about hell and what hell they're in right now and where it's going to lead them, and that just makes me really, really sad, because it's heartbreaking, really.
It's true. And I think that, even on a smaller level, when we remember what it's like to be angry for a long period of time, or to be jealous for a long period of time, how uncomfortable and miserable we are, even though we're in the midst of it and may not be thinking about that. And when we're free from it, how much more lovely even the most simple thing is that sense of well-being. My own feeling is when I'm feeling like that sense of well-being, everything is fine. And even just ordinary life is really pleasant, and a cup of tea is really pleasant, and just, and you don't have to have this high or something for the ego. So I think that certainly, on a smaller scale, regular people can sort of relate to it if they think about it. When I was feeling that way, how miserable that state is. And which I also wanted to say, that doesn't mean, going back to not reacting, it doesn't mean we don't respond to things. Because I think that gets mixed up, like you just become some sort of peaceful Buddha, not responding to the things around you that need response. But it's a different thing if I'm responding and not reacting.
Yeah, because there is the gift of presence. There is the gift of just silent witness and presence with someone in the midst of pain and suffering. I've talked to grieving families who've lost loved ones, and it's really hard oneself not to have that key into our own feelings of grief and loss for the things that happened in our lives. But by the same token, we can actually be silent witnesses and let them know that we have an empathetic presence. And just recently, I was talking to a woman who trains others in what are called empathy circles, which I think is a fascinating concept, where you actually sit with people and listen empathetically to the things that they're saying and the things that they're giving out without reacting, because our story is not important in this moment. And this is why the Buddhist concept of the bodhisattva is so important. The bodhisattva is more interested in taking care of and being present for others, because they're contented and whole in themselves. And because they're contented and whole in themselves, they have this availability. They're available for other people. They don't have to accomplish something with that other person. They just have to be present. And that openness that the person is embodying in that moment is heaven for that person who needs someone to listen empathetically. And to be present in that way. I think it's a really powerful way of being with someone. And even just to accept somebody else's anger and just respond from a place of sincerity. I was talking to a person the other day who was quite upset about something, very angry about an injustice that had happened. And I had to not feed their story so that they would, that they could, so they could get a moment of relief from the story. And getting that moment of relief from the story for them was a moment of heaven. And they were just like, and I said, I honestly don't know what to say to you, because this is such a difficult thing. But I just want you to know I'm here for you and I'm here with you. And they said, you don't have to solve this for me. That's how they put it.
That's a really, really powerful point. And that is a very feminine perspective. And it's probably one of the things I thought Khenpo Rinpoche was extraordinary at. I would just walk into an interview with him and literally burst into tears. And there's not a lot of people I am like that with. My mother was about the only other person I would ever do that. And it was his presence. There was just something about when he was with you. And on top of it, he didn't even, at least when I went to the interviews, he always had a translator. So he didn't even speak directly to me. And yet he had such a strong presence that you felt that complete, I don't know what it was. It's hard to describe, just that he was fully there, embodied with you in the moment. And no matter what was going on with you, I never felt judged by him. I did get a few lectures, but they were good. They were good. I mean, they were not, I didn't feel like, put down. I don't want to put it like that, but that presence, you're right. There is something really powerful, and maybe it's not emphasized enough in our culture.
Oh, yeah. And, and it all comes back, because talking about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he passed away in 2019, right? So, but a lot of people tell me that they feel they can actually summon up sort of his empathy and presence in their life. Even now, they can see it and feel it. And this just tells you, because of course, at the end of the day, one says, well, how do we gain this skill that people like Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche have, and people like the monk in the Zen story? How do we gain that composure and the ability to endure? And I think it really does. It does come from just that almost childlike wish to be of benefit to everyone we meet, and just holding that thought in everything we do. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation, but may I benefit you? It's just a silent that we hold inside us. And meditation allows us to extend our capacity to do that. And that's what allows people to be angry in our presence and not feel judged. And because it, in that moment, we really are trying to just embody that wish to be present and that wish to be of benefit, because people feel that, because we speak without words continuously. I mean, there's nonverbal communication going on continuously. And if we cannot judge people with our demeanor, and we can just wish for their benefit, even if we don't know what to do, that's a very powerful thing all by itself.
It is again, totally.
Heaven and hell.
Heaven and hell. So we have like another maybe 2 minutes. I did want to thank Sherry and Joel for listening in. And is there anything last comment you'd like to make before we head off the show?
Yeah, I want to thank you for giving voice to so many people's aspirations to do better and be better and to find truth. I think that's very important. And I think that, so I appreciate what you're doing. And I also appreciate the idea that we as individuals can make a difference in the lives of others. And I think that even if we don't know how to resolve our own heaven and hell here, what we can do is make the aspiration to be able to be that being in the future who uplifts one person who's feeling low. If we can just reach into that suffering for a moment, be where that person is and help lift them up, that's a powerful thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. We love having you here. And thank you all for listening in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a wonderful holiday period.